As net zero costs soar and government mandates kick in, the climate liability game begins. And this is by Christopher Chantrill. What are we doing about climate insanity? This is the question raised by Lord Frost in a recent speech to the Global Warming Policy Institute in Britain. Short answer, not much, not yet, but there is hope. Frost believes that governments in Europe are beginning to freeze on their climate agendas. I really feel like our own government is starting to realize that the economics are more dubious than the net zero proponents claim. If, as some commentators say, our Prime Minister is starting to worry about the cost of net zero, that can only be welcomed. And then he noted that support for the net zero policy is beginning to wane, with starting to question net zero measures across Europe, quote unquote, as climate change policies begin to be implemented. The most strongly supported measures are those most people probably don't think will affect them: changes to pension fund investment rules and frequent flyer levies, while support for phasing out gas boilers has halved and support for electric vehicle subsidies is now only slightly positive. Airline frequent flyer fees? How about a tax on NGO employees and left-wing billionaires who fly privately? Unfortunately, politicians in the West, quote, actively prefer to live in complete cognitive dissonance, end quote, rather than think about anything. And rather, the political system will choose lifestyle change to save the planet, the politicization of everybody's everyday lifestyle choices, the emphasis on local living and sustainability. The only thing Frost can recommend is to be ready for the change of pace. The job of those willing to challenge the rush to net zero is to see this critical moment coming and start preparing the policy. And he used the point of what Frost realizes concerning what happened in the pandemic and how government used and manipulated the public opinion. Once the government sets a narrative in motion and gets everyone on its side, it cannot reverse its course and cannot admit that it made mistakes. The narrative continues until the word blows up and the fringe supporters leave the government. Perhaps the blowout from the climate narrative will come sooner than we think. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, NERC, that's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, predicts a 19% chance of a grid emergency at 8 p.m. in Texas this year. I suppose in every political cycle there is, first, the looming crisis, second, the identification of the enemy, third, the call to arms. And if a war proceeds to victory, then the regime is secure in power. If the war ends in defeat, then the regime will try to blame its internal opposition, the climate deniers or anti-vaxxers, such as the saboteurs and destroyers that Stalin blamed, and the four old men, quote-unquote, the old morals, culture, habits, and ideas that Mao blamed for everything. In other words, in the face of its defeat, the regime blames someone else, anyone else except themselves, for failure. The only question then is how long the regime will survive as it purges the opposition, real and imagined. So when the net zero movement starts to fail, our prudent and wise governors will know it's not their fault. I wonder who they will blame then. And no doubt they will start to blame the lying climate deniers for stalling the glorious climate plan, which surely would have saved the climate and the economy if only the skeptics had not prevented the full execution recommended by the climate experts. Don't forget the pernicious influence of racists, TERFs, homophobes, and far-right extremists abetted by authoritarian republics and the very scary, violent, extremist religious sects. Now, Jane Fonda already knows who to blame. She says, men, we must arrest and imprison these men, she said. Yes, the blame game is the testimony, quote-unquote, that the government strategy has failed and that it is limited to blaming racist, sexist, homophobes, witches, deniers, Uncle Tom Cobley, and everybody else. But I have an idea. According to the science, the way species survive changes in their environment is adaptation. They adapt by changing their behavior, or with fitness or better genes. And people survive and thrive when people invent new ideas and products and ways of working together that enable them to meet the challenges and inevitable changes of life on this earth. But first, the rulers must fail completely. And this was from a post on American Thinker. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.